Hello, and welcome back. Today we look at those given life sentences who were later granted freedom. We will go over what they did, why they did it, and why they were let out. The cases we cover include some very notable crimes that shocked the UK. Their parole being granted shocked many in the same way. Some cases we cover today were not given life, but if they were an adult, would have received a life sentence. I want to quickly go through what a life sentence is in the UK. Despite its name, it doesn't mean spending your life serving your sentence in prison. It means being on licence for the rest of your life. In England and Wales, life imprisonment is a sentence that should last the rest of your life, although in most cases the prisoner will be eligible for early release and a minimum term will be set by the judge. This term is usually 25 years. Once you have served the minimum term set by the judge, you will be considered for release. The parole board is responsible for deciding if someone can be released from prison after they have served their tariff. They will be looking for evidence of change from the time the offence was committed to now. If the parole board decides that they no longer present a risk to public safety and can serve the remainder of their sentence in the community, they will always be on licence. Some of these bail conditions can include reporting to a police station, electronic tagging, residence, which requires the defendant to stay at a specified address, curfew, with restrictions from entering a specified area or communicating with specified people, as well as surrendering their passport. In the UK, we have a separate sentence, which is a whole life order. It's the harshest sentence in the UK, and it means that the criminal will remain in prison for the rest of their life and will have no chance at parole. They also will be given no minimum term. The only time will be except in exceptional compassionate circumstances. These cases we are covering today are of those who remain free. I will be covering those released who went on to commit another crime in my next video. Now that we have gone over sentences, let's start off with our first case. 1. Robert Thompson. On the 12th of February 1993 in Merseyside, Liverpool, two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, took the life of 2-year-old James Bolger. Thompson and Venables led Bolger away from the New Strand shopping centre after his mother had taken her eyes off him just for a few seconds. CCTV at the shopping centre showed Thompson and Venables casually observing children, apparently selecting a target. Both boys were bunking school, which was a regular occurrence. During that day, they shoplifted many times. One of the boys later revealed that they were planning to abduct a child. They walked with James Bolger for around 2.5 miles across Liverpool. They were seen by around 38 people, but most did nothing to intervene. 2 people challenged Thompson and Venables, but they either claimed that Bolger was their brother or that he was lost, and that they were taking him to the police station. Opposite a police station, across the road, they led Bolger up a railway line where they took his life. James was found and a huge investigation began. A breakthrough happened when a woman, upon seeing slightly enhanced images of the 2 boys on TV, recognised Venables and remembered seeing him playing truant with Thompson in the bottle area that day. Both of the boys were arrested, which shocked the police. Forensic testing was conducted and it was found that both the boys had blue paint, which was found on James, as well as other forensic finds. Both boys were charged on the 20th of February 1993. The parents of both the boys were moved to different parts of the country following threats. At the trial, it was found on the same day they had attempted to lead away another 2-year-old boy, but had been prevented by the boy's mother. The boys were considered by the court to be capable of mischievous discretion, meaning they had the ability to act with criminal intent as they were mature enough to understand that they were doing something seriously wrong. At the trial, Venables stripped off his clothes and said, "I can smell James like a baby smell." The boys by that time were aged 11 and were found guilty on the 24th of November 1993. They became the youngest convicted in the 20th century. The minimum term recommended for both boys was 10 years. They would have been eligible for release in February 2003 and both would have been 20 years old. A newspaper handed a petition bearing nearly 280,000 signatures to Michael Howard, who was the Home Secretary at the time, in a bid to increase the time spent by both boys in custody. The campaign was successful, and Howard announced in 1994 that the boys would be kept in custody for a minimum of 15 years, meaning that they would not be considered for release until February 2008, by which time they would be 25 years old. But this was overturned in 1997 by the House of Lords. They ruled it was unlawful for the Home Secretary to decide on minimum sentences for young offenders. The High Court of Justice and European Court of Human Rights have since ruled that although the Parliament may set minimum and maximum terms for individual categories of crime, it is the responsibility of the trial judge, with the benefit of all the evidence and arguments from both prosecution and defence. Prime Minister at the time, John Major, made a statement saying, "Society needs to condemn a little more and understand a little less." Thompson was held at Barton Moss Secure Care Centre in Manchester. Venables was detained in Vardy House, a small unit at Red Bank Secure in St Helens in Liverpool. These locations were not publicly known until after the boys' release. While imprisoned, the boys were taught to conceal their names and the crime they had committed. Both boys had their parents regularly visit them. Both boys received education while incarcerated. Venables was said to have made good progress, resulting in him being kept in Red Bank for the full 8 years. Usually the facility is a short-stay remand unit. It's said that both boys suffer from PTSD. Venables said that he experiences nightmares and flashbacks. In June 2001, the parole board ruled that both boys were no longer a threat to public safety and could be released. They had served their minimum term and it had expired in February of the same year. Home Secretary at the time, David Blunkett, approved the decision, and they were released a few weeks later on with a lifelong licence. The boys were given new identities and moved to secret locations under a witness protection programme. The terms of their release were that they were unable to contact each other or Bulger's family. They were prohibited from visiting the Merseyside region. Curfews may be imposed on them, and they must report to probation officers. If they breached the rules or were deemed a risk to the public, they could be returned to prison. A court injunction was imposed on the media after the trial, preventing the release of details about Thompson and Venables. The worldwide injunction was kept in force following their release on parole, so their new identities and locations could not be published. On the 26th of April 2013, 2 men received suspended jail sentences of 9 months, after admitting to contempt of court by publishing photographs that they claimed to be of Venables and Thompson on Facebook and Twitter. The posts were seen by 24,000 people. There were multiple people who were charged or fined for releasing information on the two, including some media outlets. It was said that Venables was described as posing a trivial risk to the public and unlikely to reoffend. The chances of his successful rehabilitation were described as very high. In March 2002, after a period of reduced supervision, Venables began excessively drinking and taking other substances, as well as downloading illegal images. He also visited Merseyside, which was a breach of his licence. In that same year, Venables was arrested following a fight outside a nightclub. He claimed he was acting in self-defence, and the charges were later dropped after he agreed to go on an AA course. 3 months later, he was found to be in possession of illegal substances. He was subjected to a curfew. In 2005, Venable was aged 23. His probation officer met another girlfriend of his, who was aged 17. After a number of young girlfriends, it was presumed that Venables was having a delayed adolescence. In 2010, Venables contacted his new probation officer, reporting that he feared that his new identity had been compromised at his place of work. The probation officer arrived at his flat. They saw Venables attempting to remove or destroy the hard drive of his computer with a knife and a tin opener. The probation officer's suspicions were aroused, and the computer was taken away for examination, leading to the discovery of illegal images. In 2010, he was returned to prison. The Ministry of Justice revealed that he had been returned to prison for an unspecified violation of the terms of his licence of release. No further statements were made. On the 21st of June 2010, Venables was charged with possession and distribution of illegal images. It was alleged that he had downloaded 57 images over a 12-month period. He also let others access the files through a peer-to-peer network. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. The judge ruled that Venables' new identity could not be revealed, but the media were allowed to report that he had been living in Cheshire at the time of his arrest. It was reported in 2011 that Venables once again would be given a new identity. On the 4th of July 2013, the Parole Board for England and Wales approved the release again of Venables. On the 23rd of November 2017, Venables had been recalled to prison for possession of illegal images again. On the 7th of Feb 2018, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. In September 2020, he was denied parole. In December 2023, he was again denied parole. The parole board said the panel was not satisfied that release at this point would be safe for the protection of the public. It's reported that British authorities have spent $65,000 in legal fees to keep his identity a secret. At the time of this recording, Venables remains in prison. On the other hand, Thompson has not reoffended since he was released in 2001 at the age of 18. Reports claim that Thompson is in a stable relationship and he is settled in well to his local community in the Northwest. Thompson's statement to the parole board was revealed. He stated, "At that time of my life, I was completely out of control and spending time with a group of friends whose main occupation was committing crime and causing trouble. I was out of control because my life on the streets was better for me than my life at home. I do feel aware that I am now a better person and have had a better life and a better education than if I had not committed the crime. There is obviously an irony to this, but it is part of my remorseful feelings as well. I personally wish Mr. and Mrs. Bolger and their families to know that I am desperately sorry for what I did, and I am aware of the enormity of what I did. I am deeply ashamed of what I did, and I have played a part in this horrible crime." Thompson remains free today, and his identity is protected by a worldwide injunction. 2. Kenneth Noy. Kenneth Noy is a career criminal. From a young age, he started dabbling in stealing. It was reported he was a bully in school and he ran a protection racket with other pupils. When he left school, he started stealing bicycles and altering their appearance to sell them on for more money. He also was put in an institute for young offenders for a year. Growing up, he remained in the criminal underworld and was an informant for the Metropolitan Police. He was arrested in 1977 for robbery and made the connection with the corrupt police officers. Alongside criminal activity, he built up a legitimate haulage business. A policeman he was working with persuaded customs not to look at Noy. His tips to the police were to prevent competition with a rival gang. He used his haulage business as a cover-up. He built a mansion and lived a more than comfortable life. On the 26th of November 1983, he acted as a fence, otherwise known as a moving man, in the Brinksmat robbery. As part of the investigation, the police surveillanced his home. Noy fatally took the life of Detective Constable John Fordham, who was involved in the surveillance. He was acquitted in 1985 on the grounds of self-defense, but was found guilty in July 1986 of conspiracy to handle some of the stolen gold and conspiracy to evade VAT. He was sentenced to 14 years and fined $500,000. He was released from prison in 1994, having served 8 years. The police also recovered $3 million from Noy while he was in prison. 2 years later, Noy was driving his Land Rover on the M25 in Kent and got into a road rage incident. 21-year-old Stephen Cameron was the passenger while his 17-year-old girlfriend Danielle Cable drove. In a fit of road rage, Noy pulled his car over and aggressively approached the couple. Stephen Cameron also got out the car. They began to fight. Stephen Cameron reportedly got the better of Noy, so Noy got a weapon and took his life. Noy then calmly walked back to his car as Danielle Cable rang an ambulance. Danielle Cable was put into witness protection as the investigation began. After the crime, Noy went back to his mansion in Sevenoaks, went to a pub and enjoyed a roast dinner. He turned on the news and saw that Stephen had lost his life. He said he only did that as he was defending himself, but soon planned his escape. Noy was fleeing the country in Pal John Palmer's helicopter. Palmer, nicknamed Goldfinger, had helped Noy launder some of the $26 million worth of gold stolen in the Brinksmat job. While Noy was on the run, Detective Constable John Donald was jailed for 11 years for passing confidential information to him. The police initially named Anthony Francis as the man they wanted to question. By December 1996, this name was found to be a false identity used by Noy. After the Land Rover Discovery registered in his name and matching the vehicle driven by the man who took the life of Stephen Cameron was unloaded in Cyprus in July that year, Noy was not found in Cyprus. A police hunt assisted by other authorities found Noy in Spain, where he was arrested near Gibraltar. On the 28th of August 1998, Cameron's girlfriend Danielle Cable, who was the witness, was secretly flown out to identify him. Noy lost an appeal against his extradition from Spain 7 months later. At his trial, he claimed self-defense, saying he had fled because the police hated him and he feared not receiving a fair trial. He was found guilty in 2000 and was given a life sentence with a minimum tariff of 16 years. Danielle Cable was given a new identity under the Witness Protection Programme, having been praised by the police for her courage in giving evidence in the presence of Noy and his associates. Another eyewitness in the Cameron crime, Alan de Cabral, declined protection and was found with his life taken in his car on the 5th of October 2000. He also worked within the criminal underworld. Although Noy was questioned by the police, they concluded that the unsolved crime had no proven connection with Noy and did not charge him. Noy was reported to have been moved from a Category A prison to a Category B prison in September 2011. In March 2018, Noy was moved to Stanford Prison, which is a low-security prison with a day release provision for prisoners. In May 2019, the parole board announced that Noy was suitable for return to the community and would be released from prison within about 3 months. On the 6th of June 2019, now aged 72, Noy was released from prison after serving 20 years. The parole board considered risks associated with his release due to his readiness to carry and use weapons, and because Noy was not being able to resolve arguments reasonably at key moments, as he did not always control extreme emotions well. The board concluded that any perceived risks could be managed in the community, and thus he was suitable for release. Recently, his 2 eldest sons are being investigated for a £40 million green scheme. He is said to still live in Kent. He told Stephen Cameron's girlfriend, Danielle Cable, she has nothing to worry about. He is 76 years old. 3. Harry Roberts. On the 12th of August 1966, Roberts was in a van with 2 others near Wormwood Scrubs Prison. Detective Constable David Wanwell, Detective Sergeant Christopher Head, and PC Jeffrey Fox went to investigate the occupants of the van. Roberts took the life of DC Wanwell and DS Head. The other occupant in the van, John Duddy, took the life of PC Fox. They fled the scene quickly, but a passerby saw their van driving fast and noted the registration plate. There was a huge manhunt, and Roberts was captured on November 15th while sleeping in a barn. He admitted to taking the life of the 2 police officers. He was ordered to serve at least 30 years behind bars before being eligible for parole. Duddy passed away in Parkhurst Prison in 1981. In October 2014, the parole board approved Roberts' release the following month. He had served 48 years and is now 82 years old. He was last seen in East England. A resident who recognised him said, "From what I know, he is quiet, laid back and reserved. After being approached by a reporter, he told them he would smash them." According to another news outlet, he seems to be trying to keep his head down, and there is no evidence of him having much of a social life. 4. Mary Bell. Mary Bell was born into a household that was unstable. Her mother and father both struggled with addiction problems, as well as the law. The children were highly neglected and treated appallingly. Mary was described as an unwanted child. Bell was dropped from a window, given tablets and handed to a mentally unwell woman who could not have a child, until being returned back to her mother. At home and in school, she showed aggression and mood swings, fighting with boys and girls at an early age. On Saturday, the 11th of May 1968, a 3-year-old boy was discovered wandering dazed and injured. The child later informed police he had been playing with Mary Bell and Norma Bell. Norma Bell was Mary's best friend. They were not related. They stopped at a disused air raid shelter when he had been pushed 7 foot from the roof to the ground. He was unsure which one of the girls had actually pushed him. The same evening, the parents of 3 small girls contacted police to complain that both Mary and Norma had attempted to attack their children as they played in the sandpit. That evening, both girls were interviewed about these incidents. Both girls denied any culpability for the air raid shelter incident, claiming they had simply discovered the boy. Further questioned about the attempted attack on the other 3 young girls, Mary denied any knowledge of the incident. However, Norma admitted Mary had tried to attack each of the girls. Police notified the local authorities of the incidents and of Mary's violent nature, but due to their age, both girls were simply given a warning. No further action was taken. On the 25th of May 1968, the day before her 11th birthday, Mary Bell took the life of 4-year-old Martin Brown in an upstairs bedroom of a derelict house. A local workman named John Hall soon arrived on the scene and attempted to perform CPR, to no avail. As Hall attempted CPR, 2 local girls, 10-year-old Mary Bell and her 13-year-old friend and neighbour, Norma Bell, appeared at the doorway to the bedroom. Both were quickly shooed out of the house. The 2 knocked on the door of Martin's aunt and informed her, "One of your sister's kids has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell." Mary Bell is believed to have committed this crime alone. On the 31st of July 1988, a 3-year-old boy named Brian Howe was last seen by his parents in the street outside their house in Newcastle, playing with one of his siblings, the family dog, Mary Bell and Norma Bell. When he did not return home later that afternoon, concerned relatives and neighbours searched the streets without success. At 11 p.m, a search party discovered he had had his life taken. A huge investigation began, and 1,200 children were questioned. 2 of those children were Mary Bell and Norma Bell, who were the last seen with him. Both girls were evasive in their initial statements, but they freely admitted to having played with Brian on the date, but denied having seen him after lunchtime. Mary stated she remembered seeing him with an 8-year-old local boy playing with Brian on the afternoon of the 31st of July. She had also seen him hitting the child. She also told the police that the boy had scissors. This was a self-incriminating statement, as only the police knew that scissors were at the crime scene. The local boy was cleared and Mary Bell was cautioned. When brought into the police station, she made a confession. Norma was interviewed, where she admitted to seeing her friend commit the crime. Both girls were arrested. They underwent psychological evaluations. The result of these tests revealed Norma was intellectually delayed and a submissive character who easily displayed emotion, whereas Mary Bell was a bright yet cunning character, prone to sudden mood swings. Occasionally, Mary was willing to talk, although she rapidly became sullen, introspective, and defensive in nature. The 4 psychiatrists who examined Mary Bell concluded that, although not suffering from a mental disorder, she suffered from a psychopathic personality disorder. Mary Bell was convicted of manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges. Mary Bell was initially detained in a Durham remand home. She was transferred to a second remand home in South Norwood. She was then transferred to Red Bank Secure Unit, a young offenders institution in Liverpool, in early 1969, where she was the only female with around 25 other young inmates. At the age of 16, in 1973, she was transferred to a secure wing of Style Prison in Cheshire. Mary Bell resented her transferal to this facility, and while incarcerated at the prison, she unsuccessfully applied for parole. In June 1976, Bell was transferred to Moor Court Open Prison, where she undertook lots of courses. 15 months later, in September 1977, Mary Bell made headlines again when she and another inmate, Annette Priest, absconded from this open prison. They spent several days in the company of 2 young men in Blackpool, visiting amusements and sleeping in various local hotels. Her penalty was a loss of prison privileges for a month. She was moved to open prison Arscombe Grange in 1979. She was then allowed to work under supervised guidelines. She worked as a waitress and a secretary. She was released from Arscombe Grange in May 1980 at the age of 23, having served almost 11.5 years in custody. She was granted a new identity, allowing her to start a new life elsewhere in the country under an assumed identity. Upon her release, a spokesman is quoted as saying, "Belle wishes to be given a chance to live a normal life and to be left alone." 4 years after her release from custody, in 1984, Belle gave birth to a daughter. This was proved to be her only child. Her daughter knew nothing of her mother's past until 1998, when reporters discovered Belle's then current location in a resort town on the Sussex coast. This forced Belle and her 14-year-old daughter to leave their home and be driven to a safe house by undercover officers. They then relocated to another part of the United Kingdom. Belle has allegedly returned to Newcastle on several occasions in the years following her release. She is also alleged to have lived in this location for a time. Belle's current whereabouts are unknown and remain protected by the 2003 High Court order. It's been reported that she's remorseful, and she doesn't claim she was wrongly convicted. She admits what she has done. She is 66 years old. 5. David McGreevy. David McGreevy was born in Lancashire. He joined the Navy, where he hoped to make a career. He was dismissed in August 1971 after being court-martialed for starting a fire that destroyed a mess. He then moved back in with his parents. His fiancée broke up with him, and he was fired from several jobs. Fed up with his life, he began drinking heavily. His parents forced him to move out in 1972. Unable to live with his parents, McGreevy began boarding with his friend Clive Kenneth Ralph and his wife Dorothy Elsie and their 2 small children, Paul Kenneth and Dawn Maria. Both worked full-time. McGreevy, who didn't have a job, acted as the babysitter. At that time, McGreevy's family and neighbours, as well as the Ralphs, knew him as a person who loved children, including the Ralph children who he looked after. On the 13th of April 1973, the Ralphs arrived home from work. They discovered the children and McGreevy were missing. They also saw that their home was in a disarray. They drove to Worcester Police Station and reported what they had discovered. Police responded to the home and commenced a search of the home and area. The 3 children were found with their lives taken. McGreevy was arrested by police at 3:50 a.m. walking along a road 2 miles away from the home, trying to hitch a ride out of town. Upon his arrest, he said, "What's this all about then?" At first, he denied any responsibility, but several hours later he said, "It was me, but it wasn't me," after which he described in detail what he had done. His only reason was that the baby would not stop crying. In 1973, he appeared in court and pleaded guilty to taking the lives of the 3 children. The hearing only lasted 8 minutes. There was no defense plea, no motive, and no case of diminished responsibility as he pled guilty. He was sentenced to multiple life terms with minimums of 20 years. While in prison, he was attacked many times and spent most of his sentence behind bars in protected conditions. He was reported to have successfully adjusted, accepted rehabilitation, and engaged in painting and learning. In 2006, McGreevy became headline news after he was transferred to an open prison and allowed to stay in a bail hostel in Liverpool. A newspaper reported this, and he was sent back to a closed prison. In December 2018, following a parole hearing, the report said that he had changed over the last 45 years and legally cleared him for release on parole, adding, "He has developed self-control, as well as a considerable understanding of the problems that he has had and what caused them." A network of supportive friends in the community was also identified as a protective factor. It's unknown where he is located, but he remains free. 6. Liam Quinn took the life of a police officer in central London in 1975. 2 officers questioned Liam Quinn on February 26th after they spotted him acting suspiciously. Noticing he had a lot of Irish money, they asked to see where he had been living. Quinn, a member of the IRA, tried to flee. Policeman Stephen Tibble joined the chase on a motorbike. He had Quinn cornered when the US-born Irishman took his life. He fled to Dublin. Later on, he served a sentence in Ireland for being a member of the IRA before being returned to the US. In 1981, he was arrested by the FBI, and after a legal battle, was extradited to the UK in 1988. He was found guilty. It was recommended he serve 30 years, but 11 years later, under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, he was released. He is 75 years old. 7. Howard Wilson. On the 30th of December 1969, a gang of 3 robbers attacked a bank near Glasgow. The leader of the trio was Howard Wilson. Howard Wilson was a former police officer who had resigned from the force. After the robbery, Inspector Andrew Haslop spotted them unloading the £14,000 worth of loot. When he investigated with some of his colleagues, Wilson took his life. He took the lives of 2 police officers on the day and wounded another. It's suspected that he did this as he was in a panic that his former colleagues had caught him. He was handed a life sentence, and it's reported that he did well in prison. In 2002, he was released on parole at the age of 64. He had served nearly 33 years. It's believed that he now lives in Perth, Scotland, in a flat. 8. Sarah Davy. In 1998, Sarah Davy and her friend Lisa Healy took the life of 71-year-old widow Lily. They befriended her, and once they were in her home, took her life. Both were sentenced to a minimum of 8 years inside. Davy was first released in March 2013, but kept getting recalled. She has been freed 7 times. Parole board documents said she has been released on licence on 7 occasions since her first such release in March 2013. Each of those licences has been revoked and she has been recalled to prison. The panel heard that overall Miss Davy had demonstrated application of relevant skills and learning while in custody. She is currently in Arscombe Grange Open Prison in York. It's reported she enjoys shopping trips to the city, manicures, having her hair done, and is even allowed to use sunbeds. She's now in her late 30s and can apply for parole again. Although she's not technically free, she is allowed a lot of visitation outside of the open prison and could be free in the next few months. 9. Ricky Stewart. Ricky Stewart took the life of 52-year-old musician Philip Haslip in November 2003. Philip's family later discovered Stewart was wanted for taking the life of his mother's boyfriend, Donald Nicholson, in September 2001 and R-ing a 53-year-old grandmother. Sentenced to life imprisonment in August 2004 for taking the life of Philip. He was later given an additional 12 years for taking the life of Nicholson and 10 years for the R after pleading guilty. Stewart was denied parole 7 times, but the family have now been told he has been allowed out on temporary licence. He is free today. 10. Shauna Hall. Becky Watts was last seen at home in Bristol on the morning of the 19th of February 2015. She was reported missing at around 4 p.m. the following day by her stepmother. Investigators found that her phone, laptop and tablet computer were missing from the house, but she had not taken any money or spare clothes with her and did not tell anyone that she was going away. Nathan Matthews, Becky's stepbrother, and his girlfriend Shauna Hall were questioned by the police. They were at the house at the time. They said they had not seen Watts but heard the door slam and assumed she had left. Becky Watts was found on the 3rd of March. On the 4th of March, Matthews was charged, and on the 6th of March, 4 other people who had been arrested were charged with assisting an offender and having been accused of helping to hide Becky. On the 22nd of June, Hall, who was originally charged with perverting the course of justice, was charged with taking the life of Becky Watts. At court, the prosecution claimed that the text messages between the two, as well as other content found at their home, suggested a shared unnatural interest in attractive teenage females. DNA linked both Matthews and Hall to items that were found on Becky Watts. Matthews was found guilty and Shauna Hall was found guilty of manslaughter. On the 13th of November 2015, Matthews was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years and Shauna Hall to 17 years in prison. She was released on the 1st of September 2023 after serving half her sentence. 11. Jack Shepherd. Jack Shepherd and Charlotte Brown met on an online dating site. On their first date, Jack Shepherd took Charlotte out on his boat on the Thames. The pair had been drinking champagne and the boat was in poor condition. He lost control of the boat. Shepherd was plucked from the Thames alive, but Charlotte Brown was found and passed away later in hospital. He went on the run, but was convicted of manslaughter by gross negligence in his absence after an Old Bailey trial in 2018. The following year, Shepherd handed himself in to the police in Georgia and was brought back to the UK. He was also handed a 4-year jail term for attacking a barman, to run at the same time as his 6-year sentence. In July 2020, appeal judges ruled that 78 days he spent in custody in Georgia should count as time served, meaning an earlier release date than would originally have been expected. After serving half of his sentence behind bars, Shepherd, now aged 36, was freed. 12. Kevin Batty. Kevin Batty was arrested on September 26, 2003. He took the life of his ex-girlfriend's mum. He then embarked on a tense standoff with the police. In Hull, the family were having a family meal when Kevin Batty attacked his mother-in-law. He took her life. He then went upstairs to the bedroom and dangled out the window his 1-year-old daughter when police had arrived. He then barricaded himself in the room before setting fire to items in the house and throwing them at the police. Officers in protective clothing stormed the bedroom after 2.5 hours and disarmed him, while the fire brigade dealt with the blaze. He was given life imprisonment. He stated the reason for taking his ex-mother-in-law's life is because he believed she was the reason that him and his girlfriend had split up. Not much is known how he got on in prison, but he was re-released on parole license in 2020 and remains free. 13. Aaron Knowles. Aaron Knowles, age 17, and Mark Rickard was age 9. On the 23rd of March 2003, father of one, Jeff Lyon, went into Hull city centre for a few drinks after watching a football match. Also in the city centre were Mark Rickard and Aaron Knowles. Shortly after 3 a.m, 2 sisters walked past and saw Jeff Lyon lying prone in an alcove on the road. He was severely drunk. They tried to help, but were reassured by Rickard and Knowles an ambulance had been called. But no ambulance had been called, and once they were alone, the pair began to attack him. They took his life. The pair pleaded guilty and were both sentenced to life imprisonment. Rickard was to serve a minimum of 12 years in prison and Knowles was to serve a minimum of 9.5 years. Rickard was released in early 2020, with Knowles' case being referred to the parole board, and a hearing date is yet to be confirmed for this year. 14. Brian Jones. Brian Jones had split up from his ex-wife, Katrina Jones. He was angry. On the 27th of November 2009, he arrived at their old house. He began arguing with her. She was setting up a divorce party, celebrating the end of their 10 years of marriage. He became violent and took her life. The former doorman and bodybuilder had denied taking her life, raising the defences of diminished responsibility, but he was found guilty after a 2-week trial. He was told he'd serve a minimum of 10 years in 2010. The parole board confirmed he was released in 2020. That concludes the cases for this video. Please let me know what you think. I'm sure you've already questioned the justice system, but if not, this video will definitely make you start. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time.